Let me tell you something about working in the United Earth Diplomatic Corps. It's about 90% paperwork, 9% mind-numbing bureaucracy, and 1% pure unadulterated chaos. And boy was I about to become intimately familiar with that 1%. My name is Jack Reeves. Official title Junior Xenolinguistic Liaison, Level 3. Unofficial title, Professional Coffee Fetcher and Master of Formatting Interdepartmental Memos. I'd been working at headquarters for 3 years, and my most exciting achievement to date was color-coding our alien communication response templates. The day everything went sideways started like any other Tuesday. Gray fluorescent lights. The constant hum of translation computers. Linda from accounting complaining about the vending machine's lack of gluten-free options. Standard government building atmosphere. I was elbow-deep in a stack of communication protocols from the Galactic Confederation when Commander Ellison burst through the door. Now Commander Patricia Ellison was not the type of person who burst anywhere. She was a carefully measured, precisely articulated career diplomat, who walked with the calculated precision of a Swiss watch. Something was very wrong. "Reeves," she said, her voice tight enough to turn coal into diamonds. "Explain this." She slapped down a holographic communication transcript. The alien script flickered and danced, simultaneously beautiful and completely incomprehensible. To most people anyway. But I wasn't most people. I was after all a Level 3 xenolinguistic liaison. The problem was, even I was having trouble making sense of this particular transmission. Most alien communication followed predictable patterns. Polite introductions, formal greetings, carefully structured diplomatic language. This was like watching a drunk jazz musician improvise quantum physics equations. "I'm working on it, Commander," I said, which is diplomatic speak for I have absolutely no idea what's happening. She raised one perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Commander Ellison could communicate more with a single eyebrow movement than most people could with an entire PowerPoint presentation. The holographic transcript continued to pulse. Fragments of meaning teased at the edges of my understanding. Something about protocol, engagement, challenge. The Krel'nax dialect was notoriously complex, with grammatical structures that could change meaning based on atmospheric pressure and the current migratory patterns of their planet's primary insectoid species. "Sir," I ventured, "this might be a translation issue." Commander Ellison's look could have frozen magma. "Might be. Here's a pro tip about diplomatic work: never say might be when you're dealing with first contact scenarios. Especially not when the species in question is known for their, shall we say, enthusiastic approach to conflict resolution." The Krel'nax weren't just another alien species. They were the galactic equivalent of that one guy at the bar who's always looking for a fight and considers negotiation a fancy word for foreplay. Their entire culture was built around ritualized confrontation. Their diplomatic corps was basically their military. Their peace treaties read like war declarations. And somehow, through what I can only describe as a perfect storm of bureaucratic incompetence, we had just potentially insulted them in a way that would make challenging their grandmother's cooking honor seem like a mild misunderstanding. "I'm going to need about 2 hours, I said, knowing full well that in diplomatic terms, 2 hours might as well be an eternity. Commander Ellison's other eyebrow joined the first. "You have 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Right." I dove into the translation software like a drowning man clutching at a life preserver. The Krel'nax communication system was less a language and more a complex mathematical algorithm that happened to occasionally sound like words. Their syntax changed based on atmospheric pressure, planetary rotation, and I kid you not, the collective mood of their hive mind bureaucracy. The first layer of translation made absolutely no sense. It was like someone had taken a jazz improvisation, run it through a blender, and then tried to reconstruct it using only mathematical proofs and interpretive dance. "Computer," I muttered, "run a cross-reference with protocol Gamma 9. The holographic display flickered, lines of text twisted and warped. And then, like a magic eye picture suddenly coming into focus, something clicked. "Oh, no. No, no, no. In the Krel'nax diplomatic language, there are 147 different ways to say hello. Each one carries a specific cultural, political, and social implication. Somehow, the translation matrix had interpreted our standard first contact greeting as a ritualized challenge to their entire species' honor. What we thought was a friendly introduction basically translated to "your entire genetic lineage is so profoundly incompetent that we challenge you to prove your right to exist in this galaxy." And we'd sent it. Officially, with the United Earth Diplomatic Corps seal. "Commander," I said, my voice hitting a pitch that would make a teenage boy during puberty sound masculine, "we may have a slight problem." Ellison's look could have stripped paint. Define slight problem, Reeves. I took a deep breath. We've accidentally declared total war on the Krel'nax, and not just war. We've challenged their entire species' right to genetic continuation. Most people would have yelled. Most people would have demanded explanations. Commander Ellison simply sat down, very carefully, and said, "Explain." Precisely. So I did. I broke down the linguistic gymnastics that had transformed our carefully crafted diplomatic greeting into the galactic equivalent of telling someone their entire family tree should be retroactively aborted. The Krel'nax had a cultural response to such challenges that made Earth's most aggressive diplomatic protocols look like a kindergarten tea party. They didn't just respond to challenges, they responded with what could only be described as genocidal enthusiasm. How bad? Ellison asked. Worst case scenario, complete planetary destruction. Best case scenario, generational blood feud that will make historical human conflicts look like mild disagreements. Just another Tuesday at the United Earth Diplomatic Corps. The communication system started lighting up. Incoming transmissions from Krel'nax communication centers. They were fast, really fast, and they were definitely not sending invitation cards. "We need to recall that transmission," I said. Ellison's laugh was not a laugh of humor. It was the sound of someone who realized the entire species was about to have a very, very bad day. Recall a transmission that's already been processed through the Galactic Communication Network. She shook her head. Welcome to diplomatic work, Reeves. Nothing is ever that simple. The first Krel'nax response came through. It was less a message and more a declaration. A very loud, very angry declaration that essentially translated to preparation for total annihilation commencing. I looked at Commander Ellison. She looked at me. "Well," she said, "this is going to be an interesting performance review." The next 12 hours were a masterclass in bureaucratic pandemonium. If chaos could be weaponized, we'd just invented the most powerful diplomatic bomb in galactic history. News travels fast in the Galactic Confederation. News of a potential war travels at light speed, powered by equal parts terror and morbid curiosity. Within hours, our communication channels were flooded with reactions from every sentient species within communication range. The Zorn Collective Night, a hyper-logical species that communicated primarily through mathematical equations, sent a transmission that basically translated to mathematical probability of human survival, 0.000003%. Recommendation, immediate surrender. The Silicon Concordance Night, a race of sentient computational beings, simply sent a series of algorithms that I'm pretty sure was their version of uncontrollable laughter. And the mercantile guilds, they were already taking bets, literally. Betting pools were being established on everything from total human planetary destruction time to number of escape pods successfully launched. Commander Ellison had transformed our conference room into a war room. Holographic displays flickered with incoming transmissions, threat assessments, and what could only be described as increasingly panicked diplomatic communications. "So," she said, looking at me with a mixture of professional detachment and barely concealed horror, "explain how one junior liaison manages to start an interstellar incident before lunch." I'd always been good at paperwork. Explaining myself, not so much. "It was a translation error," I offered weakly. "A translation error," she repeated. It wasn't a question, it was a statement that somehow managed to convey more disappointment than most people could express in entire speeches. The Krel'nax, meanwhile, were mobilizing. Their communication channels were a storm of linguistic fury that made human military dispatches look like poetry readings. They weren't just preparing for war, they were preparing for the kind of total annihilation that would make historical genocides look like minor disagreements. Their first official response came through our primary diplomatic channel. It was less a message and more a visual representation of pure unadulterated rage. Imagine the most angry thing you can think of, then multiply that by 1,000, then add some really sophisticated alien curse words. "They want us to formally present our challenge representatives," I said, scanning the transmission. Commander Ellison's eyebrow reached new heights of skepticism. "Or what?" In Krel'nax culture, when a challenge is issued, both parties are required to present their most elite warriors. Except in our case, our challenge was basically a clerical error, and our warriors were a bunch of bureaucrats who got winded walking up a flight of stairs. "We need to send a delegation," I said. "We need to send you," Ellison corrected. The color drained from my face faster than water through a broken dam. "Me?" I squeaked. "I'm a level 3 xenolinguistic liaison. my biggest achievement this year was color-coding our translation matrix. Ellison's smile was not comforting. It was the smile of someone who knew exactly how much paperwork this was going to generate. "Congratulations, Reeves," she said. "You started this mess. You're going to represent humanity." The Galactic Confederation was watching. The Krel'nax were preparing for total war, and I was going to be humanity's ambassador. What could possibly go wrong? Let me tell you something about preparation for an interstellar diplomatic mission that might accidentally start a war. There isn't a handbook for this. No idiot's guide to not getting your entire species obliterated sitting on the shelf at your local bookstore. The next 48 hours were a crash course in what humans do best: improvise spectacularly. Our diplomatic preparation looked like something between a fever dream and a corporate team-building exercise gone horribly wrong. The best and brightest minds of Earth's diplomatic and military corps were essentially trying to turn a low-level bureaucrat into some kind of galactic negotiation superhero. Captain Maria Rodriguez from Special Operations approached my training with the intensity of someone defusing a nuclear bomb. "Reeves," she said, staring me down like I was her last hope for humanity's survival, "the Krel'nax respect three things: direct confrontation, unexpected strategy, and absolute confidence." I looked down at my standard-issue diplomatic uniform, which was doing its best to make me look both official and completely terrified. "I'm more of a hide-behind-paperworks kind of guy." "Not anymore," Rodriguez replied. "The training was unconventional. Part psychological warfare, part stand-up comedy, part absolute madness. They brought in linguists who taught me not just language but the art of alien communication. They brought in ex-military personnel who taught me how to stand, how to walk, how to exude in confidence I absolutely did not feel." Dr. Williams, our top xenobiologist, broke down the Krel'nax physiology like a mad scientist presenting his life's work. "They're a species evolved from collective hive mind predators," he explained, pointing to holographic displays of their bizarre biology. "Their entire communication system is based on dominance displays and ritualized confrontation." "So basically," I interrupted, "they're like middle managers but with more teeth." The room went silent, then Rodriguez burst out laughing. "That," she said, "is exactly why you might just survive this. Humans, as it turns out, have some truly bizarre evolutionary advantages that no other species in the galaxy quite understands. We're adaptable, we're unpredictable, we turn problems into opportunities faster than most species can even comprehend a problem exists. Our technology is a perfect example. Most galactic species had been locked into technological paradigms for millennia. Humans, we reinvent everything every few decades. Our innovation cycle is so rapid it looks like chaos to more stable civilizations." During one training simulation, I was supposed to follow a strict diplomatic protocol. Instead, I cracked a joke. Then another. Then I started deliberately misinterpreting their challenge protocols in ways that were technically correct but completely nonsensical. "What are you doing?" Rodriguez asked, watching the simulation. "Being human," I replied. The Krel'nax communication model was built on rigid, predictable responses. Humans wrote the rulebook, then immediately looked for ways to break it. Our ability to be completely wonderfully illogical was our secret weapon. They expected a formal challenge. We were going to give them something they could never predict. By the time my diplomatic mission was ready to launch, I had transformed from a terrified bureaucrat into something else. Not quite a warrior, not quite a diplomat. Something uniquely, wonderfully human. Commander Ellison gave me my final briefing. Her eyes were a mixture of hope, terror, and what I can only describe as a prayer to whatever diplomatic gods might be listening. "Don't start a war," she said. "No promises," I replied. The shuttle to the Krel'nax diplomatic station was waiting. Humanity's fate rested on the shoulders of one slightly neurotic, completely unqualified junior liaison. What could possibly go right? The Krel'nax diplomatic station looked like someone had taken industrial architecture, run it through a blender of biological nightmare fuel, and then decorated it with what I can only describe as aggressive geometric patterns. It was the architectural equivalent of a threat display. My shuttle docked with all the grace of a drunk penguin on roller skates, which honestly was pretty much my entire diplomatic strategy at this point. The moment I stepped through the airlock, I knew this was going to be interesting. Krel'nax diplomats are not what you'd call warm and cuddly. Imagine a cross between a praying mantis, a bureaucratic middle manager, and something that definitely wants to eat you, but only after filling out the proper paperwork. They stood in perfect geometric formation, their exoskeletons clicking with what I can only describe as bureaucratic anticipation. The lead diplomat, I'm going to call him Chief Nightmare Fuel, stepped forward. His communication translator crackled to life. Human representative, the translator boomed. You have eschewed a challenge of total genetic invalidation. I looked around the room, remembered my training, took a deep breath, and then I did the most human thing possible. Whoops, I said. Complete silence. The Krel'nax communication matrix did not have a protocol for whoops. Their entire linguistic system was designed around precise ritualized confrontation. And here I was, throwing a verbal wrench into their perfectly calibrated machine. Chief Nightmare Fuel's translator flickered. Explain, he demanded. So I did. I explained the entire series of linguistic mishaps, the translation errors, the bureaucratic nonsense. I broke down our communication with the kind of detailed, meandering explanation that would make a government committee proud. I talked about comma placement. I discussed translation matrix algorithms. I went into excruciating detail about the subtle differences between formal and informal Krel'nax dialect markers. The Krel'nax diplomats started to look confused, then intrigued, then metrot, if it's possible for beings with exoskeletons to look bewildered, slightly overwhelmed. You're telling me, the lead diplomat finally said, that this was a clerical error. Worst paperwork mistake in galactic history, I confirmed. Probably. Here's the thing about human communication that no other species quite understands: we can turn almost anything into a negotiation. We can find common ground in the most impossible situations. We apologize. We explain. We make our mistakes so comprehensively that they become their own form of diplomacy. The Krel'nax have entire war protocols for handling challenges. They have ritualized combat procedures, elaborate punishment systems, entire cultural frameworks built around conflict resolution. They did not have a protocol for someone essentially saying, "Whoops, my bad," with the kind of bureaucratic detail that could put an accounting textbook to shame. We require a formal resolution, Chief Nightmare Fuel insisted. I pulled out a stack of forms, multilingual, cross-referenced, filled out in triplicate. How about some paperwork? I asked. The look on their faces was something between confusion, respect, and what I'm pretty sure was the alien equivalent of a migraine. Humanity's first major diplomatic test was going to be solved with the most powerful weapon in our arsenal, bureaucratic nonsense. The next 6 months were a masterclass in diplomatic absurdity. Our little clerical error became the most discussed event in galactic diplomatic history. The Krel'nax, it turned out, were so thoroughly confused by our approach that they basically created an entirely new diplomatic protocol just to handle, well, us. I got promoted, not because I was particularly brilliant, but because I had managed to turn a potential species-ending conflict into a bureaucratic comedy of errors that somehow resolved itself through the power of excessive paperwork. My official commendation read like a fever dream. Something about unprecedented diplomatic resolution through linguistic creativity and demonstrated exceptional human problem-solving capabilities. Commander Ellison's attached note was more succinct: "Don't ever do this again." The Galactic Confederation developed what could only be described as a mixture of respect, terror, and complete bewilderment towards humanity. We weren't just unpredictable, we were unreasonably, magnificently chaotic. The Krel'nax, for their part, now had an entire diplomatic subsection dedicated to human communication anomalies. They studied our ability to turn potential interstellar incidents into bureaucratic labyrinths with the same intensity that researchers might study a particularly fascinating new species. During a follow-up conference, their lead diplomat, my old friend Chief Nightmare Fuel, actually requested a detailed breakdown of human communication strategies, which I provided, in triplicate, with color-coded annotations. "Humans are impossible," he told me, his translator rendering his clicking exoskeleton sounds into something approximating professional frustration. "Thank you," I replied. Our first major interstellar diplomatic test hadn't just been survived, it had been transformed into something uniquely, wonderfully human. The galaxy was learning an important lesson: never underestimate a species that can turn paperwork into a weapon of mass confusion. As for me, I was just happy I hadn't started an actual war. Well, mostly happy. Okay, partially happy. Look, diplomatic work is complicated, and sometimes, just sometimes, a misplaced comma can change everything.